Hi everyone, I am here today. I'm your host, Geraldine Anello. A little bit different from what we used to do with interviews of music directing, with everything that's going on in the world and PUA ending and the theaters and Broadway announcing that we're going to be closed until January 2021. I wanted to help our members in a different way and musicians in a different way, which is having very concrete conversations about how COVID is really impacting us on different levels, whether they're financial or psychological or just in any kind of way. So today, I have a special guest that I'm really excited to introduce to us that's going to be able to help us a lot. This is Adam Call. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Geraldine.
So Adam is the founder of AHK Coaching, which is a financial coaching services. He's a couples financial counselor. He has a master's degree in tax law from NYU, and he is a certified mediator for conflict resolution. He's also, of course, a financial advisor. So he's going to help us today talk about how what's happening in the world and us as musicians and freelancers, how it's impacting couples and relationships in relation to money. So we're going to talk money and we're going to talk relationships. Hey, Adam. Well, first of all, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be part of this.
Yeah, and it's exciting too because you've played music your whole life, so you have a deep appreciation for what we do when we can
Yeah,
do it.
absolutely. I mean, I've never done it as my full-time career, but especially as I was building my business, I was doing different gigs. I'm a pianist mainly and playing in churches and other opportunities. And then I actually moved a little bit ago, like late last year, and I was just starting and had my first paid opportunity on the books, and it was like going to be March 23rd or something. I was going to be playing at a church, and they called me and they're like, it's canceled, and so are church services indefinitely. And I was like, all right. So while I don't know necessarily what it is to be a full-time musician, I have lost some income as a result of the pandemic that was music related too. And so hopefully I can bring some peace of mind and shed some light for your folks.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I was going to do Bat Out of Hell, the tour in Florida, which you are going to come
I
and
had
see.
tickets, I know.
I know. And now I've heard through the rumor mill that it may be coming next summer, but nothing is official. I'm sure we'll wait
Right.
here. So I think when I'm looking at musicians, what I'm seeing is that we've got about, three cases, right? Like every musician is being affected in one way or another.
Of
But
course.
the ones who are in relationships, they're either in relationship with someone who has a full-time job, and I'm curious as to what kind of difficulties that can be to be with someone that maybe does not quite understand the loss of identity or what it means financially and how to
Mm,
deal with that. That it's not as easy as just quickly looking for a job and getting one. We've got people who are in a relationship with someone who may have had some loss and not all loss, but also how do they manage, or maybe both of them are in that scenario. And then we've got people who both of them are freelancers and artists and that's a very frequent case for musicians that they're with someone else who is also a musician. So what in your practice as a financial coach have you found, in what ways the money stress affecting couples?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely affecting couples in all kinds of ways. And well, first, I just want to say, yeah, if you're feeling stressed and anxious right now around your finances, that's normal, that's expected, that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with you. And just to appreciate that, I think we all know that, but it can easy to get caught up in the self-criticism bit of it. And my hopes, I mean, it's important for me to say, like, there's not necessarily going to be some overnight cure for your financial challenges, or your debt's not going to all go away, or you're not going to get free rent necessarily. But for those of you who are in relationships, right, I think the only thing worse than struggling is struggling alone, right, and not feeling like you're in support, have support from your best friend, and that you're not on each other's team, right? So hopefully the conversation we have here today can help you to get on the same page, feel like you're actually working together in partnership to make as much progress as you can on your finances and minimize the stress and conflict, because I'm definitely seeing it. People are stressed out. Maybe they have their kids at home, so it's making, even doing online work difficult because they have additional responsibilities they're not used to and all of this. I mean, there's just all kinds of challenges right now for sure.
What are some things that I have, like a phone ringing behind me, so I muted myself, but I
No
think it's
worries.
gone now. What are some things that couples can do when they're finding themselves in conflict with each other as a result of the money stress due to the pandemic? It's kind of like adding on the layers, right?
I know. And I mean, financial stress is already one of the biggest causes of fighting and a top cause of breakups and divorce, right? So it's a challenge to be taken seriously. And of course, money touches so many aspects of our lives. That's why it's been so stressful for a lot of people. And even if you haven't lost your income yet, like you are nervous you might lose your income, right? Like that's a lot of people as well. Um, some of the things you can do are on the concrete side of things, support you and your partner can support each other in actually taking a look at your numbers rather than hiding. And at first that might be uncomfortable, but in the long run, that's at least going to help you understand where you are at. Sometimes people's situations when they look, sometimes my clients are like worse than they thought. Sometimes they're better than they thought. And sometimes they're exactly where they thought. But at least once you have that information, then you can make a plan from there. Secondly, is to just share from a support and be supportive with each other. I mean, just having conversations, holding space for each other, and really sharing about, you know, what are the hopes and dreams you still have with your money? What are the fears and anxieties and worries that are coming up, including because of COVID, right? Just establishing that safe and healthy communication. And if that feels like too much, no shame in, you know, talking it over with a friend first or a therapist first, or journaling some of your ideas and trying to kind of get them to a coherent place and then going to talk to your partner. But as much as possible, just being there for each other around this difficult time can really minimize the stress and maybe even strengthen your relationship along the way.
Yeah, and I think there's so much in what you just said to unpack, but what is that conversation like? Like, how do you start if you're not used to talking about the numbers and sharing numbers? What does that look like? You each bring out your computer, you pull out all your bank accounts. Do you do it first for yourself and then you come to your partner?
Yeah, well, you know, you said not used to it, right? And so many of us are not used to it, but it's like I would say, depending on what you're not used to it means, like if not used to it just because we haven't done it, but we feel like we can safely, then okay, great. You know, maybe we sit down and just you ask your partner, hey, I think it would be smart for us to talk about money. I think that would really help us in XYZ ways. And like, maybe we can look over some of this stuff together. Right. And then, yeah, you're pulling up some of your accounts. I mean, I'm a big proponent of that. There's four things that are really important to note when you're going to start working on your finances. One is your income, whatever's coming in. Two is expenses, whatever you're spending. Three is your assets, anything you have that has value, like a car or a home or anything like that. And then any debts, which is just student loans or credit cards, or even on that same car, it might be worth 5,000 and you also owe 4,000, right? And so like I kind of like to think of it that there's a 5,000 asset and a 4,000 debt. So looking at your assets, debt, income, and expenses is really the first place to start, and to have those in one location where you can start to wrap your brain around them. So that's if you're ready to talk about this. But if emotionally it's scary, challenging, or maybe you fought in the past or you're nervous about it, then there's a lot of different things you can do. But first, I would say before you go to your partner, take some time to reflect to yourself. You know, what is it about money stuff that is scary or anxiety inducing for me? What are my feelings around my finances? So you can give yourself some support and also recognize what triggers might come up, and then also know what you'd want to talk to your partner about, or ways in which you can ask them for what you need, right, to feel safe in the conversation. And spend some time just trying to cultivate empathy for your partner if it's this area where you struggle, right? Like if you've got a significant other who you feel like never respects the budget or always spends too much money on something, try and practice understanding some empathy and remembering that they're probably not doing it to spite you. They're probably doing it because that's the choice that feels best to them based on their priorities, their values, their own experiences with money, good, bad, or ugly, that they've had over a lifetime, right? And so it's just a matter of different perspectives, and the work is to really understand each other's perspectives. So once you've kind of done some of that introspection and also cultivated some empathy about your partner, I think the last step that's really good if you've been avoiding this conversation and if it's been creating tension is to acknowledge your part, right? So maybe you're the person who's been really aggressive with your partner. Or maybe you've been scared and you've avoided the conversation and let this unworkable situation persist for months or years, right? That's your role. You can always take responsibility for your part. And so then when you go to your partner and you're finally ready to say, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about our money. I've been feeling this way about it, right? I've been feeling kind of anxious or nervous. And I realized that, you know, I've been wanting to talk about it for a long time, but haven't stepped up to the plate and asked for that conversation. And that's on me, and, you know, started to breed negative feelings, and that's not fair to you. So I'm sorry for that. Right. And here's why I want to talk about it is because, and you fill in your own answer, but for most people, it's like, hey, because I love you, I want our relationship to be great. I want us to have the best lives we can. And I think if we talk about money and get on the same page with this stuff, it can really help us move that forward. Right. So when's a good time to talk?
I think that's interesting because you're talking about the dreams and the goals. And I think it's really hard right now because we're musicians and we have no idea when we can work in our job again. Like
Yeah.
you know, like if I'm looking at my own situation, I've got some potential gigs in November that very much may not happen because they're not even set in stone. And because they're not set in stone, because we're not sure if there's going to be a second wave, if we're going to be confined again. So there's a big question mark. Then Broadway said January, but that's very much a question mark as well. I may have the Battle of Hell next summer, but so everything's a question mark. Am I looking at November, at January, at next summer, beyond? And I know all musicians pretty much are in that same situation. So how can we have goals and dreams like that? How can I have a conversation with anyone about what I want my money situation to be when I don't even know when I can work my real job, not like a secondary job that I can find somewhere, hopefully crossing fingers, because a lot of people are not finding jobs right now. And that's another part of the equation too, right? Like there's just so much unknown. How can you plan or dream when there's so much unknown?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question. And, you know, I'll amend what I shared previously to say, you know, you do want to be authentic in what you're saying to your partner, right? Like maybe the conversation is, you know what, I've just been feeling so much anxiety around this. And I think that I could feel more peace of mind if we were working together on this. Right? Like maybe it's not, I want us to be able to travel the world and have 64 kids and own a mansion, right? Like maybe that's not
64
the
kids.
framing. I was thinking of something that was expensive, right?
That no woman ever.
Right? Oh my God. No, you know, whatever, maybe it makes more sense to share about that. I would just really like to have some sense that we're working on this together and some teamwork and maybe see if I can have a little bit more peace of mind. Right. And like I said before, you know, I don't think you're going to take your stress level to zero in a time like this. Right. Not unless you're like self-medicating and sleeping all day. But if you're dealing with reality, there's going to be stressors right now. I mean, this is a really challenging time for much of the country, the US, much of the world, not just because of COVID. And so I think that's real, right? So whatever, maybe you talk about just like, hey, you know what, I think I could really sleep a little bit more easily if I felt like we were on the same team and working on this together, right? Maybe that's the dream right now. That being said, I would encourage you to still let yourself dream and just, you know, when I work with my clients and they tell me their hopes, their dreams, the things they want to achieve that involve money, we're not necessarily getting them all right away, right? But we're going to take a look at, let's say you and your partner have like 3 things each you want to do, and then there's 3 more things you want to do as a couple, then we can prioritize those, right? And maybe we start working towards the top goal for each of you and for you as a couple. And even if that means we're putting $1 a week towards that goal, right? But we're going to start making progress. And there's something to be said for that momentum, right? As things go. And it's important to actually have these conversations and look at your finances so that you can start to make some of these steps. Otherwise, you're just frozen in place, right? You're just frozen in that anxiety. And it's very easy to be in a mindset of like, I'm screwed, nothing's ever going to happen. And listen, again, I'm not like for the bypassing and like, oh, I'm going to manifest a new job tomorrow and COVID's going to go away. Like, that's not how it works, right? That said, if you are stuck in that negative mindset, right, it's going to weigh you down. It's going to eat away at your vitality. It's going to eat away at your peace of mind, right? And so doing what you can to give yourself some room, right, to have a little bit less heaviness, a little more lightness in your life, and a little more teamwork with your partner.
I think something you talked about was the empathy and the importance of empathy. And what came up for me when you said that was actually interesting, because I always think of it as the person who is suffering is the person that just lost their job, that is now facing a long time of not going back to it. But when you said that, I thought, oh, there is something to be said for having empathy for the partner who is actually not having lost a job, who is still working, who is still making the same amount of money, but who is now the sole provider and is a one income earner for the family instead of being a dual income earner. And so that's interesting, because it's like, how do you have empathy if your partner does not really want to change their way of life because their job is still the same, and you're feeling like, maybe they out to change it on your behalf for your own sake, like that, and that requires your empathy to understand that their situation is difficult as well in a different way.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. And it's not necessarily easy, right? I mean, for whatever reason, we tend not to be trained in Western society to really see from another person's point of view. We, especially in the US, is very individualistic, right? And that's no one person's fault, but it's okay to acknowledge that, right? Like, hey, I want to be able to understand where you're coming from, and I'm still practicing that skill, but it would be great if you could help me to understand that. And there's a lot of things that happen, for example, with the partner who maybe still has their income. They may have a past history of people trying to take advantage of them or their family. So they may feel like nervous about sharing their income or changing their lifestyle, right? It may not be because they don't care about you. It might be something in their past, right? Or there is something called survivor's guilt. Like if you were I forget the numbers, but it was like 30% of people lost their jobs or something, or were unemployed or underemployed. If you're one of the people who kept your job, there may be a sense of like, oh, I don't know if I even deserve this, or like, oh, I feel guilty about being lucky and still having my job, right? And those feelings can be complex, as well as what you were mentioning, about being the sole now income earner and the sense of responsibility and increased responsibility that comes along with that. So there's a lot on your plate if you're the person who still has the job, and there's a lot on your plate if you're the person who has lost your job or lost part of your income. And that's why the key is that empathy piece. But it's really important that each of you practices that with each other, right? Really understanding where you're coming from and understanding where your significant other's coming from. That's the path forward to the most intimacy in your relationship, and also coming up with the best solutions, because they're coming from a place of care, of love, of shared understanding.
I think it's interesting because you're really talking a lot about the importance of conversations, having those conversations, having them again. And I think, the conversation, and at least what I've seen, is that it's mostly a lot about, we've lost money, we're probably not going to get money again, and it's about finding a job. And it kind of remains on those three topics for very good reasons.
Sure.
But you're saying to add on other topics beyond that, like a budgeting, planning, or also like hopes and dreams, and maybe like past issues related to money, what it brings up. There's a lot more to it than just the loss of income and the uncertainty of the future.
Yeah. And look, I mean, we don't need to overcomplicate things. If you're in that space of that kind of, you're having those three conversations like Geraldine just shared, maybe the thing to do is just hold each other and take turns sharing about how you're feeling about your finances and your job situation. Like, my work is not about getting you to a particular end goal or making you a millionaire or having you able to retire at a certain age. If those are your goals, I'll help you with figuring out how to get there, right? And what kind of plan would get you there. But it's more about how can you have a better experience of your life. And for some of us, you just need to be held, whether that's physically or emotionally right now, and be like, this is so scary. Like, I don't know when money's coming next. This is so scary. So much of my identity is as a performing musician, and I haven't been able to play for anyone in 3 months or 4 months, right? I mean, it's a big deal losing your, not that you've lost your career in full, but, you know, we think about usually people like when they lose their relationship, let's say a long-term partner, or they get divorced. And I've been divorced, so I know what that feels like. And there is a tremendous loss of identity there, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of other types of grieving we don't talk about besides just like losing a loved one or getting divorced. And I think losing a big part of your identity, whether it's in the form of your career or a community you were a part of, those things hurt, right? And I've lost those myself. And there's an article, maybe I could find it for you. It's like the different types of grief that don't usually get acknowledged, but that we also need to honor for people. And they talk about this loss of identity, and it's a really big thing. And so I'm a big fan of just starting with empathy and compassion. And, you know, there's a balance, right? Like, I think looking at the tactical and practical financial stuff and trying to figure out solutions is extremely important. So I'm not saying don't do that. What I'm saying is I think so much of society, so many, you know, influencers and coaches are so focused on that piece that we often neglect the part of just like, yeah, I just want someone who I can talk to and be heard about like how rough this has been, right? And oftentimes having your partner be that person can really be valuable. And along the way, yes, you know, send out a job application, or, you know, try and review your credit card monthly statement to see if there's any subscriptions you're not using and you can, you know, eliminate. I mean, of course, do those things, right? Like when I'm working with my clients, we're having them do both, right? They're calling their landlords and asking if they can get a discount on their rent. And they're also talking to each other about what they knew and what they saw with money growing up and how it's affected them today. Right? We're doing both of these things at the same time.
There's just so much that comes up with all of that, because like, say you're looking for a job, and what if your partner every day, you know, is like, well, how many jobs did you apply to? Or, you know, well, maybe your resume is not right, and starting to judge the process if you're not getting results, which I'm hearing a lot of people are not getting results. It's really hard to get a job right now, and particularly if it's not in a field you've worked in. So, you know, there's a situation like that. And what do you do in that case?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge, right? I want to say this before I answer is like, I recognize that the suggestions I'm making are not necessarily easy, and they may not feel fair in a certain way, and they may also not be appropriate in certain situations, right? So depending on where your partner is coming from, if they are really on you about this, especially if there's a power dynamic, right? Like I'm thinking, you know, let's say one partner still has their full-time job and is making all the money they're making, and the other partner lost all of their livelihood, right? But other dynamics might be like, for example, if one partner, especially the one with a job, is a citizen and all jobs are available to them, and the other person is not a citizen or is undocumented or on a visa, right? And there might be more job challenges. I think it's really important to be aware of those and like call those things out, right? Be like, yo, this is kind of a messed up situation. Like, I need you to tone that down. That being said, if and when it feels safe to see if you can get to the root of why they are, you know, giving you all that perhaps unwanted advice, right? And also, why does it bring up so much in you? I would imagine the standard situation is that if you're the person who's struggling and your partner, like to find a job, and your partner's asking you about it, it can be very easily to feel like ashamed or embarrassed that you don't have a job, and then defensiveness can creep up, right? And you're like, leave me alone, right? For the partner who is saying, hey, maybe your resume is not right, you know, are they being unfair? Is there an unacknowledged power dynamic? Are they being abusive, God forbid? Or maybe they're afraid, right? They might be panicked. That doesn't mean their behavior is okay, right? And that's why I say it doesn't mean that's really fair. In a fair world, like, the person would take responsibility for that they're acting out their own panic on you. but unfortunately that's not how humans always work in relationships. And so if you are trying to improve things with this person who's in front of you, right, seeing how you can maybe understand where they're coming from and seeing maybe they're speaking to you like this out of panic, right? And if they are, then that can help you resolve the situation. Again, it doesn't mean it's okay, right? Like there's a lot of balance in all of this. I'm not saying that any one person's behavior is okay or not. That's for you to decide in your relationship what you're willing to put up with or not put up with. But to try and, if you are committed to working on this aspect, then I'm giving advice kind of and suggestions from that space.
Yeah, and there's also the whole part of it of, again, like we were saying, losing identity possibly as a musician who's not working. And so different people are going to handle that emotional, psychological part differently. Some people are going to go into action and do a lot. And some people, while they really want to be looking for a job, may just have a really terrible day, and just being able to sit on the sofa instead of laying on the bed might be the biggest win of the day. And how do you deal with that, which, you know, is now impacting money and relationship, and the fact that your different ways of handling a situation may be at the opposite end of the spectrum?
Yeah, no, and I'm definitely more the type to like crawl into bed and just like grab a pillow and be under the covers. And then there'll be a moment when I like get a huge burst of energy and like go do a bunch of good things. Not good things, I don't want to say good, bad, but like go do a bunch of like job apps or reaching out to people, you know, in one moment. And yeah, I mean, these are really kind of core human issues about, and like relational issues, you know, how do we handle those different things? I mean, there's no one answer, but I can say that being clear about your own needs and your own boundaries, I think can make a big difference. So being like, and again, this isn't easy. It takes a lot of self-awareness, but just to say, you know what, I really just need a week where letting me do my thing. And like, I understand you're probably coming from a good place, but like right now I can't hear that. You know, I mean, and I've had that with different situations in my life. Like, for example, something that's been a challenge for me has been like weight and body image. And there's been moments where I said to people, like, even if I know you're coming from a good place, just right now, can you just not comment on me or how I look or what I'm eating? Like, that's just not going to help me right now. You know, so if you could just please not talk about that. Right. And I don't think there's any shame in that. Sometimes there's this weird culture that I've fallen victim to where we have to be like superheroes and like be able to listen to anything and any feedback at any time. And I think that's a good thing to strive towards, but it's also healthy to say, right now, I'm not having this kind of conversation, or I can't have this kind of conversation, whether that means you deactivate a social media account or you say to your significant other, hey, can we just postpone that topic for a week, right? Like that's some, like, so practicing those healthy boundaries, I think is something really important. And just, you know, if you think it's going to be helpful for you to not have your partner talking about your application processes and not giving advice, then try and say that to them. And they may not like it. They might feel a little hurt or defensive. And that's okay. You don't necessarily have to do anything about that, right? That may not be your issue. That may be for them to tackle. Of course, you want to say it as compassionately as you can. And if you can explain why, like, hey, you know, when you criticize my process or even ask me about it, I'm just feeling really sensitive and vulnerable right now. And I don't want to come from that place of defensiveness. And I think it would help me if we tried just for a couple of weeks, right? Like, let's try to, you know, you can ask me how the process is going, but like, don't necessarily give me advice. And, you know, something that I'll share because it's been coming up a lot lately is this sense of like, don't let yourself, don't not take action because you don't know how to do everything, right? Or they say like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. What I mean by this is, hey, it's been stressful for us talking about job applications. I don't know all, you know, I'm probably feeling defensive, but can we maybe try for a week, like where I just do my thing and you don't necessarily ask me about it, and just trust that I'll come to you if there's something to say, right? Or like, maybe you're not going to be able to figure out by next Monday everything around, you know, your history with money and your feelings about money and your hopes and dreams and your budget. Maybe you're not going to get there right away, but maybe just this week we can try and sit down and, you know, open a glass of wine and I can share with you, or you can share with me how it's been for you to lose that sense of identity, that not only are you not making money, but it's like you can't even play your instrument because you live in an apartment building where your neighbors are going to make a noise complaint if you do. And it's not safe to go to the practice rooms that you used to use or the recording studio where you play anymore, right? Like maybe that's where we start. And that alone can make a big difference. Then maybe next week we talk a little bit about some of our financial anxieties. Then maybe the week after we, just taking positive steps. My mom once gave me this advice in business, but it works everywhere. She said, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just keep on doing it, right? And over time, and even in the moment, that can make such a huge difference, right? Because even if you haven't reached a final destination with your partner, the fact that you're walking the path together, often that is really the beautiful part of it.
What I heard from what you said is that wine is still allowed in the budget. That was the main part, right?
Listen, I chose wine very intentionally, Geraldine. We know each other. This is not the first time Geraldine and I are having a conversation, so I chose wine on purpose.
What are you saying?
That on our virtual happy hour, you had wine. That's all, so I know you like wine.
I do enjoy wine. But let's talk about budget, because I am joking, but that was my beautiful tangent back into budget, because you touched upon it earlier. And you said one of the early conversations was about, budgeting, and if people have different approaches to it, and having empathy. That's when you said it, having empathy for the way your partner may be spending when you would like not to spend. And that's the same thing. It's about handling what's going on a psychological and emotional level, because some people will want to use this time, and like a way they're going to get less anxious will be, going shopping. The way some other people will be less anxious will be maybe by drinking more. I mean, there's other issues with that, but some people are doing it, or, doing drugs or things like that. And some will do it by doubling down on courses and classes, or maybe learning a new skill set in a completely new field in the hopes of getting jobs. And all these things may create different arguments with a partner if you're not agreeing on those things. Yeah. What do you do if you never come to an agreement? I mean, it's like the idea is you have a conversation and you both understand. What do you do if you just don't agree?
Yeah, well, of course, it depends what you mean by don't agree, right? We could have different things that we like to spend money on, right? Maybe you like to spend on courses and I like to spend on wine. And so maybe we figure out a way that we can each have some money that we're autonomous over, right? It's not essential that you have one shared account and you pay all the bills out of that account and you put all your money in there and you both agree 100% on everything that gets spent. I think that's a little bit unlikely, right? Just because human beings are different. And you brought up such a good point. This is such a challenging time that people are coping in all different sorts of ways, right? I mean, I definitely saw my substance use, like my marijuana use, it goes up and down, but like it's definitely been periods of time where I probably felt more stressed and that led to me using it more. And, just as much as you can, having compassion for yourself, and like we all have coping mechanisms. Like nobody doesn't. It's impossible to live free of them. But where you can, cultivating some mindfulness, if you can create a safe space for yourself, even if it's just you alone in a room in the dark, to sit with some of your feelings and process them, cultivating some mindfulness and some intentionality. And, I think when it comes to budget, and for some people, it's helpful to call it something else, like a spending plan or like a financial plan or a prosperity plan. Just takes away a little bit of that stigma and that fear of feeling like constricted by a budget. So use whatever works for you. But yeah, just to look at some of the low-hanging fruit that might be on your budget. Like I mentioned earlier, are there subscriptions you're not using? Are there places where, like my gym wanted to charge $10 a month to freeze my account, and like I said, for me, I'm not going to be going back until there's a vaccine, which will probably be like at least 5, 6, 7, 8 months, if not longer. So I realized financially it wasn't worth it to have that on freeze. And if I want to rejoin once I feel safe, then okay. But for now, I'm saving the $10 a month, right? Or if you have a car, maybe if you're used to drive a lot, you can call your car insurance company and say, hey, can I get a low mileage discount, right? And maybe some people are saving $20 or $30 a month with that.
Wow.
a lot of folks have been recommending, if you are a renter in good standing, whether it's a commercial space, like for business purposes, or your own apartment, that you can call your landlord and see if they'll give you a break. And the worst thing they say is no, as long as you do it thoughtfully. But I've seen stories of people saving hundreds of dollars a month, even if it's a couple $100 for 1 month that gets knocked off, right? So looking for some of these low hanging fruit, these subscriptions that you maybe aren't using, and really try and prioritize. So one thing I do with my clients is I have them look at their spending over the last like couple of months, and I have them put expenses into 4 categories. One is essential, right? So this is stuff like your rent, food, electricity, like these are basically essential for living, right? Number 2 is things that are not strictly essential, but are definitely worth the money. So for me, that's like Disney Plus is like $7 or $8 a month, right? And I get to watch Star Wars and I love that stuff. Okay, totally worth it, right? Or Spotify. I have a family plan shared, right? It's like $7.50 a month for all the music and podcasts. That's worth it for me. So that's a really good expense. And then I say like things that are nice to have, but like maybe aren't as much worth the money, right? So this might be like when I order in from that restaurant that like it's not really that good, but I just kind of want a pizza, and that's the only place that delivers, so I'll just get that pizza, right? But it's maybe not really that good, right? Or like, and of course, it's going to be different for everybody. And then that last category is things like I don't even know why we're spending money on this, right? That's that subscription that you forgot about, or like you are paid into a certain service or whatever, or like why am I even buying these things at all? Like it doesn't make any sense. So that last category, obviously, like you can knock those off quickly. And then the negotiation happens more in like the middle categories, right? Like what is actually worth the money, what maybe isn't worth the money as much. And what worth the money means is a very subjective calculation, but it's in there that you can look at your own budget and or talk to your partner and try and see like which things might we be willing to kind of carve out. And even if it's, hey, let's try for a month to not do this thing, right? Let's try for a month not to do this. And we know it'll save us $50 and let's give it a shot, right? See how it goes. We can reevaluate in 3 weeks. And then the other piece is like on those things that are essential, like rent, like utilities, like groceries, see if there's any flexibility there. Like you have to have those expenses, but maybe you can reduce them. So maybe that looks like calling the landlord, or maybe that looks like, hey, is there an item I could wait for it to go on sale before I buy it at the grocery store and then stock up, which will save us in the long run, right? Or things like that. Are there any special plans that my utility company has right now where they're helping people and like giving them less, maybe more of a subsidy or less of like a bill, because acknowledging the challenging economic times we're in. So, researching some of those things, which I recognize takes time and energy, but that's why I'm hoping that thinking through some of these priorities and de-stressing this a little bit by having that safe space with your partner can help free up some of that energy to go ahead and take some of these steps. Because for so many of us, there's so much going on that even calling the car insurance company feels really overwhelming. But my hope is that by taking some of these steps, by being able to share with your partner, by taking some moments to have some mindful self-awareness, meditation, being with your feelings, whatever it is, that as you do that, hopefully it will free up some energy and maybe even some time for you to take these constructive steps.
And there's one other part along decision making in a relationship and what's going on right now that I've heard come back time and time again from people in the past couple months, which is where to live. I know couples who decided right at the beginning of confinement to go back individually to their parents. I know some who together went to one set of parents or family, or sisters, siblings, things like that. I know others who are considering moving to a new area temporarily. They're like, okay, fine, we live in New York and Broadway is not going to happen for a while, so let's go buy a house we wanted to buy outside of the city and we'll live there for a year, and after that we'll, you know, maybe put on rent or maybe we'll commute, but a kind of a big change of lifestyle amidst everything else, and that can bring up a lot on top of it. Any kind of tip on how to handle those conversations and those decisions together in a way that really helps the couple move forward?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a big thing that a lot of people are thinking about. I'm living with my folks in Florida. It's a huge benefit. It saves a ton of money. It's nice to have other human beings around, at least for this extrovert, you know, and have the supportive people. And it's very much a privilege to be able to have family who you can move in and live with. And, you know, if you have that, it's great. But yeah, I think as far as how do you talk about this with your partner, well, I think if you two are having some of these money conversations generally, and you're able to be both working on the particulars of your finances, but also have a big picture sense of like commonality, and we like kind of are on the same page overall, that'll allow you to make these decisions from an informed place versus looking at them like a one-off decision. Should we do this or should we not? Devoid of a broader context. So that is one thing I would say. But secondly is, you know, to really, this is an important space to practice just listening to your partner about, well, let's say you ask them about a particular option, right? Let's say that's moving out of New York City for 6 months until, and waiting and seeing how things go, because, you know, we could go from paying 3,000 rent to go somewhere and pay 1,000 rent. It's going to save us 12 grand, even minus moving costs. It's worth it. Okay, right? But make sure that you just listen without needing to respond necessarily or problem solve. That's a huge skill in life and relationships, right? And particularly here, if your partner suggests an option and you're going to talk about it, just listen to why they like it, right? Or what are the pros and cons? What are the things they're worried about? What are the reasons they really want to do it? And just try on. It's not, right now, you don't have to negotiate anything, right? If they say, well, you know, I love being near hills to hike, you don't have to say, well, how often are we going to go hiking? Or you never hike, or blah, blah. Or like, oh, we could do that if we just drove 30 minutes outside the city. Just listen first. Just listen, understand. Listen to understand, right? And then ask them to do the same for you. And just get all the thoughts and feelings out there. And once those are like kind of floating around, okay, now we can look at which options hit on which needs for which person, which options miss which needs for which person. And then we can kind of do this in community and do it together, right? I mean, if you've been in a long-term partnership, you know that it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get 100% of the things you desire all the time, right? But it's about understanding what your needs are, understanding what your partner's needs are, and being able to communicate about those so you can make the best decisions for each individual and for you two as a group, right? And yeah, again, so much of that process is just about exploring what's there for you and sharing it with your partner and practicing giving them space to do the same, so that you, when you actually get to some of these tactical places and you're looking at the dollars, right, like you have also a shared understanding of each other as much as possible.
So last question, if we're jumping ahead to say in 5 years and you've got a couple and they're looking back at this time, what kind of would be the best scenario for them to say, wow, we really nailed these difficult times in our life individually and as a couple?
That's a great question. um
So there's no magic wand, right? They're not magically getting a job. They're not
right.
magically getting back into music jobs, right? It's still difficult time, but they made the best of it as a couple and individually.
I mean, I think it's what you just said, Geraldine. I think you kind of answered your own question. Like, hey, you know, to look back and be like, we pushed through together. Like, we tried our best. We were human. We were imperfect. We had each other's back. We let each other laugh and cry and be angry. And we didn't take it personally. And we didn't make it about us. And we were really there to hold each other through a difficult time. And now we've come out the other side of that, right? But that's kind of what life is, you know. People say like, okay, I want a partner who makes me laugh. That's great, right? And it's super healthy. I love laughing with my good friends and with partners. also like, who are they during the tough times? Because think about, especially, I mean, if you're someone who's trying to cultivate what could be a really long-term relationship or a life partnership, think about what happens. I mean, I'm 33. I've had family members die. I've had friends die. I've gone through depression. I've had more money and less money in my bank account. I've struggled to pay bills. You know, I've lost jobs. I've had massive identity shifts. I've gone through a divorce. Uh, like, this is what life looks like. Not every moment of life, right? There's also plenty of incredibly joyful and ecstatic moments as well. But there's also challenging moments. And I think what determines, is this the right partnership for you, and how are you going to do, is like how you can move through even the spaces that aren't easy to move through. Right. And so I think really, yeah, exactly what you said. The best case scenario is to look back and be like, dang, we really had each other's back. We really tried our best. We really did what we could and what we knew how to do. We didn't get it right or perfect, but there is no such thing. And kind of we made that okay, right? We gave ourselves and each other grace. We gave each other space. We tried our best, and we're still kicking, and we're
We're
still
still
here for each other.
kicking. I like that. We're still kicking. Yes, we shall not be beaten down. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking this time to help us musicians through this time. Everyone, if you're interested in learning more about Adam and his services, his name is Adam Cole, Kol, right?
True.
And not like the clothes store, called KOL. And you can find him at ahkcoaching.com, ahkcoaching.com. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, if I can just say, I have also a podcast called the Equal Partners Podcast, where we talk about relationships and money. It's on all the big platforms. And so feel free to check that out. We have lots of beautiful conversations on this topic as well.
Love it. Thank you so much. Bye, Adam.
Bye. Thanks.